And hello there, it's Tom Jordan. Got, as always, a very important program today. So nice to have you along for us for this edition of Tom Jordan Live. We got some big battleground numbers coming in regarding the presidential election. We're looking at Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina. It's very tight between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. We're going to get to those in just a moment. Also, I'm going to play you some pronouncements from both of those candidates in just a minute, trying to win you over. Kamala Harris saying Donald Trump is dangerous. Joe Biden actually said Donald Trump wants to take out a gun and kill people. That's what Joe Biden said. Joe Biden engaging in some massive falsehoods to paint Donald Trump as a wannabe killer, and then says he wants to lock him up. We're going to get to that. You may have seen some of those clips already, but we have a take on those right here on Tom Jordan Live. Well, we knew about that last part, of course, but the gross mischaracterizations of Donald Trump are, in no doubt, would have led to actually Donald Trump being the real target of potential killers. And Joe Biden, the Harris, the media are, in my view, the real danger to the physical safety for these candidates. We'll have some quotes from Biden, Harris, Donald Trump coming up here in just a moment. Also, some analysis of the race from the host of the Crisis Files, Roshini Rajkumar, will join me from Tim Walz's state of Minnesota. That's coming up in a few as well. But first, I want to get into the disinformation campaign of an MSNBC beloved Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson. That is just seconds away. Also, just a reminder to chime in, to comment, ask questions in the comment section of whatever your platform you're watching is from, YouTube, Facebook, X, and I will get to those in just a moment. Also, just a reminder, the best way you can help Tom Jordan Live is simply to subscribe and click that notification bell. Always appreciate that very much, and sharing the program is a huge help to us. All right. I want to address this spat again between Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson and Elon Musk, because Elon Musk is correct, despite Jocelyn Benson's claim that he is false and spreading disinformation, along with CNN's claim that Elon Musk was false to say that there were more registered voters than there are eligible citizens. CNN was wrong in that. It is true. And this is just another prime example of how the leftist Secretary of State of Michigan uses disinformation to warn against disinformation. She is the guilty party here. She's the one in the middle right there. And if you don't remember, Elon Musk questioned how there could be, 8.5 million registered voters in the state of Michigan, but only 7.9 million people who are even of age that could even qualify to register to vote. He was questioning that more than 500,000 person discrepancy. And Jocelyn Benson fired back against Elon Musk, saying that that true claim was actually dangerous and puts bad thoughts in people's minds. And then got a bunch of national coverage on places like MSNBC and right there on CNN. They love her, and they gave her a cover rather than addressing the real issue. And by the way, yesterday, this is telling to a lot of people, and it should be to you. I received a notice, a letter, and the letter was from the Secretary of State office that warned that any partisan information about this year's election, any partisan information about this year's election that wasn't true in her office's mind is dangerous. And people are being asked to note that person spreading that misinformation or inaccuracy, take a picture of that person, and then send in that photo to her office. Why would they want that? Is it now illegal to say something that may be a mistake or someone's partisan opinion? If that's the case, everybody needs to be locked up. But no, that's not what she's going after. Just a select few that might say and point out the obvious here, like Elon Musk did. It's an obvious question about what's really happening in this country. But still, Jocelyn Benson claims that there are 7.9 million voting age citizens in Michigan. There are 7.9 million voting age citizens in the state of Michigan. But even that is inaccurate, by the way, as we found out from the Federalist's investigative journalist Margot Cleveland. She did her own research into this, and she revealed that that number actually includes non-citizen residents. Non-citizens are not eligible to vote in the state of Michigan. So that isn't just an oversight. It's a deliberate blurring of categories. Voting is a right reserved for citizens. and including non-citizens in Jocelyn Benson's data misrepresents Michigan's electorate, making it seem like the system is more secure than it really is. The actual number, according to more accurate data, is about 7.6 million voting-age citizens. So it seems to expose, and I appreciate Margot Cleveland very much from the Federalist, exposing what is Benson's attempt to inflate the numbers a bit to minimize the issue. And that is what she is doing. So Elon Musk's statement highlighted issues with voter rolls. We know those are issues, not just in Michigan, but around the country in a variety of states. But he was accurately reflecting that more people are registered to vote than eligible citizens, which Benson labeled disinformation, as did CNN. But it's true. In fact, even if you look at her own statement, she admits it in kind of a sneaky way, trying to cover it up. But it is true. Elon Musk's numbers, I mean, they align with, findings from, Judicial Watch and Margot Cleveland, of course. There are more than 500,000 ineligible or outdated registrations still on Michigan's rolls. And Benson's decision to dismiss these facts as disinformation is just another, transparent deflection from the real problem in the state, in this country. The Michigan's bloated voter rolls have not been properly maintained in years. And it's true. It goes back for many, many different years. It hasn't been addressed, but now there's an active effort to there is an effort to address the issue. And Benson's office, along with the Department of Justice, don't want the voter rolls cleaned up before this election. So Jocelyn Benson, she strategically, if you notice in her tweet that she put out in response to Elon Musk, she strategically used this term "active voters" to suggest that the rolls are clean right now, despite more than 500,000 registrations remaining that are very questionable and ineligible. Using active voters instead of providing the full picture misleads the public, obviously. It's a classic political maneuver. You fudge some terminology here, you redefine terms, and you downplay a very critical issue. With such a high number of registrations in question, Michigan voters deserve an honest accounting, not this smoke and mirrors that these left-leaning networks are very happy to use as well by bringing Jocelyn Benson on. Margot Cleveland's research indicates that Benson's office knowingly included residents, both citizens and non-citizens, in the 7.9 million figure. It's not just a technical error, it's an intentional manipulation by inflating the voting age population with non-citizens. And Benson makes it seem like Michigan's voter registration is within acceptable limits, concealing the real situation or the real issue of over-registration. And Judicial Watch was in this as well. You might know Tom Fitton. His findings show that Michigan has failed to properly clean its voter rolls in violation of federal law. Benson has ignored these concerns, and election officials are now legally required to maintain these active voter rolls, but they're just not doing it. And Benson going on these networks. Listen, she's going to be running, it looks like, for governor in 2026. And she's actively engaged in these partisan tactics going on liberal outlets to claim that questioning the integrity of these elections should be a crime. And it should be concerning to all of us, you, me, everybody, that she's putting out letters asking people to take photos of individuals that spread inaccuracies and turn the photos of those individuals and take notes and then turn it into her office. I don't know why that doesn't concern most people. So anyway, so there's that. It is a crisis in Michigan and elsewhere. Yeah, so there's that. So now to some quotes from the candidates on the trail and their surrogates as well, which I'm sure now that Kamala wished Joe Biden was not among them. Joe Biden said yesterday, and I'll quote part of it because it's kind of hard to understand what he said, but Biden said, about the guy that's actually been targeted by leftist violence in this country, that he's the one who wants to kill political opponents. Yeah, Biden said that Donald Trump wants to actually physically eliminate, shoot, kill someone who opposes him, and then explain, Joe Biden did, his desire for Trump to be locked up. Take a look.
Thinks he has a right under the Supreme Court ruling on immunity to be able, if need be, if he if it was the case, to actually eliminate, physically eliminate, shoot, kill someone who he believes to be a threat to him. I mean, so I know this sounds bizarre. It sounds like if I said this 5 years ago, you'd lock me up. We got to lock him up. Politically lock him up.
Yeah, so Joe Biden's there. Oops, did I say that out loud? That I want to lock him up? To which you all applauded to that statement. This might look bad, so let me backtrack here a little bit. You know, politically lock him up is what I meant. Politically lock him up. What does that mean? What does it mean to politically lock somebody up? No, he wants to lock him up. That's why all these cases are against Donald Trump that are baseless. And by the way, when he said we need to lock him up, everyone in that room applauded. And so the crowd was like, no, we really want to lock up. Don't do the political lockup. Let's really lock him up. That's a better statement, Joe. We like that better. So Joe Biden trying to cover his real intent since before he was elected in 2020, which is to lock up Donald Trump. Okay, so that's a failing president who's not the best surrogate for Kamala Harris. Speaking of, let's get to some of her statements, followed by the Republican candidate, Donald Trump. Here's Kamala Harris first.
Can you say that you were honest with the American people about what you saw in those moments with President Biden as you were with him again and again, repeatedly in that time?
Of course. Joe Biden is an extremely accomplished, experienced, and capable in every way that anyone would want if they're president.
You never saw anything like what happened at the debate night behind closed doors with him?
It was a bad debate. People have bad debates. He is absolutely.
But that's the reason why you're here, and he's not running for the top of the ticket.
Well, you'd have to ask him if that's the only reason why.
What do you think?
I am running for president of the United States. Joe Biden is not. And my presidency will be about bringing a new generation of leadership to America that is focused on the work that we need to do to invest in the ambitions and aspirations of the American people. We cannot despair. We cannot despair. You know, the nature of a democracy is such that I think there's a duality. On the one hand, there's an incredible strength when our democracy is intact. An incredible strength in what it does to protect the freedoms and rights of its people. Oh, there's great strength in that. And it is very fragile. It is only as strong as our willingness to fight for it.
What are you saying? What are you talking about? Do you even know, lady?
Yeah, so that's from Sky News in Australia, commenting on Kamala Harris' visit to Royal Oak, Michigan, with Liz Cheney there and Maria Shriver. I love, by the way, Sky News in Australia. I love that network, by the way. They seem to have a better sense of U.S. politics than our own domestic journalists in this country. Kamala Harris has this knack, doesn't she, of going off into like the netherworld when she doesn't want to answer a question, which is seemingly every time she sits down for an interview or for a town hall that doesn't allow questions, by the way, from those attending the town hall. That was the case in that clip with Maria Shriver and Liz Cheney and the aforementioned Kamala Harris. Someone in the audience in that town hall asked Maria Shriver if they'd be allowed to ask questions. And here's the response from Maria Shriver.
You're not, unfortunately. We have some predetermined questions.
Yeah, those are predetermined questions, which is kind of the Kamala Harris modus operandi, right? They like to see what they're going to be asked before they're going to decide if they're going to answer that question. So, all right, let's get to some real answers and some comments here. Here's Kamala's opponent, Donald Trump.
When I was president and I would go to a lot of the sites, the tornadoes are vicious. They ask which are the worst, are the tornadoes, the hurricanes, the tsunamis. They're all bad in their own way, but I've been with Franklin Graham through a lot of them, and we're very happy to have helped him out during the course of most of them, and maybe in particular this one. This was so sad to see, such a great part of our country, and so devastating. When you looked at the size of that storm, Franklin Graham just is a special person with a great family, and his father wasn't too bad either, right? You know, my father used to take me like to Yankee Stadium. He loved Billy Graham, and he would take me as a young guy. He would take me to Yankee Stadium, and he thought Billy Graham was great. And I'll tell you what, Billy Graham's looking down, and he's very proud of his son and his family. I can tell you that without question. But as I look back at my life's journey and events, I now recognize that it's been the hand of God leading me to where I am today. And my faith took on new meaning on July 13th in Butler, Pennsylvania, where I was knocked to the ground, essentially, by what seemed like a supernatural hand. And I would like to think that God saved me for a purpose, and that's to make our country greater than ever before.
All right, so some real moments from Donald Trump right there. And he's had some viral moments as well. He's there at McDonald's, and he's at the fry machine, whatever you call it, the fryer there. And he's just talking to people. He can walk into a crowd and talk at length and extemporaneously about pretty much any issue. And right there, he's being a little bit vulnerable, talking about how he felt when he was shot, and he was hit in the ear that first time. He was actually shot. Second time, they caught the shooter prior to him taking off a few rounds. And at the same time, and right after that, the media comes out and says that, Donald Trump is to blame for being shot. It's his fault because of his rhetoric, while ignoring the incredibly, legitimately dangerous rhetoric from people like Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. I mean, they're actively calling Donald Trump Hitler. And what he wants to do is go out and kill. He wants to take a gun himself and go around and start shooting his opponents. That's what Joe Biden says. How is that not absolutely, first of all, it's ridiculous. Donald Trump doesn't want to do that. He has no intention of doing that at all. He's the one that's being shot at, and there are attempts on his life. And they're ramping up the rhetoric. And when Barack Obama was saying the other day that, what happened to us? Why are we such a divided country? It was by design. Barack Obama was the one that, when he was president and when he was running for president, he was actively calling for people to go out and get in the faces of independents and Republicans, get in their faces, shout them down, confront them, yell at them. That's not unifying, I can tell you that. So when he asks the question disingenuously, how do we become so divisive? It was by design. And you can go back to 2008. Barack Obama is this was his job prior to being a senator. He was a community organizer. That sounds nice. What does a community organizer do? It pits people against each other in order to get one group's ideas and priorities forced down the throats of others, and to make the other side look incredibly evil and bad in order to get your priorities passed in various legislatures. You demonize individuals. That's the tactic, and that's Chicago politics. That's the Saul Alinsky approach from the 1960s and 1970s. That's the Weather Underground approach. Remember that terrorist network? I'm not saying they're all terrorists right now, but there is a model of using violent rhetoric in order to intimidate others to get what you want across. And that includes labeling people these horrendous things like Adolf Hitler. They said the same thing about John McCain, that he was Hitler when he was running for president. They said the same thing about Mitt Romney, that he is Hitler when he was running for president. These are Nazis. But when they stop running for president, okay, you're all good now. Come on over to our side. And they love them now. They loved John McCain. They love Mitt Romney because he's not Hitler, and neither is Trump. So in all of that, and things like this, with Donald Trump going to McDonald's, polling is now out that shows that Trump is gaining this ground in these battleground states like Michigan and Wisconsin. And there was a lot of concern among Democrats about their chances in a lot of these key swing states. And the shift in the polling, it demonstrates that the electorate's growing frustration with the status quo is a very, very frustrating situation. And Kamala Harris said she wants to turn the page. Well, if you want to do that, reelect Donald Trump and get Kamala Harris out of office, because she is right now the one in power and has been for the past 3.5 years. Kamala Harris's, her inability to inspire confidence in these critical states within her own party suggests that the voters prefer Donald Trump's decisive leadership and his clarity, even among those previously loyal to Democrats. Harris's campaign message that Trump represents a threat to democracy, it's backfiring. People aren't buying into that. They're kind of sick of it, actually, particularly among working class voters. Polling the worst among the messages her team tested. Her team tested which messages are among the worst and categorizing or mischaracterizing Donald Trump as a threat to democracy is one of the worst messages being tested by her own team. About if it's resonating or not with the voting public. And voters see these warnings as detached from their immediate concerns, rising costs, jobs, national security. And that failure exposes this disconnect between the Democratic elite and just ordinary Americans who are increasingly prioritizing tangible results over this political rhetoric. The political rhetoric is, it's typical. I'm not going to say it needs to stop because it won't stop. It will never stop. But they need to address the real issues, Democrats do. Right now they're scrambling as cracks appear in the blue wall states of Michigan, of Pennsylvania, of Wisconsin. And the Senate race is now labeled as toss-ups as well. I want to read the latest polls that came out this morning. Nationally speaking, the general election, Trump versus Harris, Donald Trump, this is the Wall Street Journal poll, Donald Trump is up by 3 points. Another poll by CNBC, Trump is ahead by 2 points, nationally speaking. There's one other poll by TIP, Harris is ahead in that one, 50-47, up by 3. But you look at the battleground states. I mean, look at Pennsylvania. There's 2 polls out right now that show Donald Trump is ahead in Pennsylvania. One is Franklin and Marshall. He's up by 1 there. The other one, Emerson. He's up by a point there as well. In Wisconsin, Donald Trump now leading by a point in Wisconsin. North Carolina, Trump is up by 2 points. Yeah. In this one poll by Emerson, Maris put out a poll. North Carolina, Trump is up by 2 in that one as well. Arizona, Trump is up. These are battleground states. Michigan, they're up. There's one, Georgia, where now it looks like it's tied in that battleground state. These Senate races, these are real vulnerabilities for the Democrats. And it reveals that, the party's overconfidence in these traditional strongholds, it might all backfire. If Trump capitalizes on this shifting momentum, he could dismantle the Democrats' path to victory by flipping the states they once thought were secure. And Kamala Harris's weak performance in these swing states like Nevada and North Carolina, making Democrats increasingly anxious about her chances in this. With no real clear strategy, it doesn't seem to reverse the trend because they're still going out, as you've seen just even yesterday, that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. He wants to kill you. Is essentially what they're saying. And they're not buying all this, campaign messaging out there by Harris's campaign. I think it's weakening her coalition around her. So if the Democrats cannot inspire enthusiasm or deliver compelling policies, Trump's path to reclaiming the White House becomes clearer by the day. And then we have the issue of the Arab Americans, and we'll just highlight Michigan, but we're going to speak in a moment with Roshini Rajkumar in Minnesota. That's a state that has a lot of Muslim and Arab Americans in there as well. But look at Dearborn and Dearborn Heights. The mayor there, Bill Bozzi, he's urging their communities to shift support to Donald Trump. He cites frustration with Kamala Harris and the Biden administration's handling of the Middle East. The Middle East is blown up under his watch, and nobody's happy about it. Israelis are not happy about it. Jews are not happy about it. Palestinian supporters are not happy about it either, and they're pushing away from this administration, and it signals a significant fracture in that aspect of that Democratic coalition. If even a fraction of this, historically Democrat-leaning community of these Arab Americans, if they shift to Donald Trump, which they are, Michigan, in particular, this key swing state, could swing in Donald Trump's favor. It's already heading that direction. And Democrats can no longer rely on identity politics like they have been to secure votes when voters demand results. Things are still far more expensive than they were in 2019, 2020, and 2021 in the beginning of it. And then after 2021, after January 20th, things started to shoot up in price. You probably have noticed that, and it's created your own economic instability in your own home. There's another primarily Muslim community in Michigan. It's called Hamtramck. The mayor there criticized the Joe Biden-Kamala Harris administration for expanding the wars in the Middle East. and now warning of the risk of regional conflict or even World War III. These aren't just MAGA folks saying this. This is a major concern and a lot of frustration, and it highlights how voters no longer trust the Biden-Harris administration's ability to maintain global stability. And they're looking at Donald Trump saying, listen, this guy had peace through strength. We saw it in real time because remember, he was president for 4 years, and that resonates with that community. It's a preferable alternative, especially among those directly affected by, U.S. foreign policy and the blunders that have occurred since Joe Biden has taken office, particularly since the summer of 2021, the pullout of Afghanistan. And it could be redefining this whole shift right now, what voters value the most. Results over rhetoric. And you've seen that play out in the Muslim American community, in particular because of this war started since October 7th of 2023. And remember, Donald Trump has a track record here, right? He has a track record of avoiding new wars. And that resonates deeply with communities that value stability. Which community doesn't value stability? I don't know. Joe Biden's lack of control over these escalating conflicts has alienated a whole lot of people, and many people who now prefer Trump's no-nonsense leadership over these empty promises from the current administration. So that's the Arab American community right now. And some community leaders are praising Donald Trump's alignment with religious values. And they're calling him a candidate who can bring peace. Religious values. And this came out in Dearborn about a year or so ago. It might have been the beginning of this year or the late last year, where the folks in Dearborn were finding out what was being taught in their schools. And they're like, listen, we want respect for our faith. And what's being taught in our school is not respect for our faith. And, so there's this movement to abandon Biden. We've seen that in abandon Harris is the movement as well in Dearborn. And, they're expanding this, from Michigan is where it started, but they're expanding it to these other battleground states like Georgia and Wisconsin, and it is gaining ground. So it's kind of, I guess some people would classify it as a rebellion against the Democratic Party or the Democratic bloc, but they don't like what they're seeing, and I think they've been patient for a very, very long time. I want to bring up quickly Tulsi Gabbard quickly, because this is just another indicator of the switch that's happening. People who were strong liberals, Democrats, are now moving over to what is now being classified as a big tent party. And you know that she announced the other night, that a couple nights ago, that she's switching to the Republican Party at that Trump rally that you're seeing right there. And it just further illustrates the disillusionment with the Democratic leadership. And they're demonizing individuals who don't align with every single policy that they support. So Tulsi Gabbard's transition, it's this dissatisfaction with the Democratic Party, and it isn't limited to just the right. It is growing within their own ranks. In a moment, we're going to have Roshini Rajkumar. She's the host of the Crisis Files to join us to talk about these many issues. And she is in one of these states that are crucial. Obviously, it's a blue state right now. It's Minnesota, the state of Tim Walz, who is now the vice presidential candidate for the Democratic Party. Is Roshini here yet, Cameron? We have her in? Okay. All right, we're going to get Roshini Rajkumar. She's wonderful. She's an attorney. She is a political analyst. And if you haven't checked out her podcast, it's called Crisis Files. And it's a wonderful discussion about how to manage crises. And so what I want to talk to her about is, what's the messaging? What's wrong with Kamala Harris's messaging right now? Why isn't it mostly resonating, particularly with independents and more moderate Democrats? And I mean, I have my own theories on this. I think it's never good to be disingenuous and inauthentic in your messaging and portraying yourself as somebody who you're not, and not being very clear and being mostly vague about a variety of issues that are important to the Americans. I mentioned some of these polls that are out today, and there's a lot of them, as we're under 2 weeks now away from the presidential election. But Georgia, I mentioned, this is the recent one from today, from this Marist poll, Georgia, Trump versus Harris. That is now a tie. And remember back in 2020, the state of Georgia, Donald Trump lost that state by, I think it was 12,000 votes. So it is back and forth, and they do not have right now. They used to have the Republican senators. Right now, they don't have a Republican senator in the state of Georgia, but they do have a Republican governor. So it is truly this purple state going back and forth from red to blue. And there's been a lot of support, it seems. That we spoke with Jamie Rowe yesterday, is a Republican strategist, and he does believe that the state of Georgia is recent polling showing that they are pushing more conservative. South Dakota, obviously, that's going for Trump. That's he's up by 27 points there. Very, very different polls in like Pennsylvania. So most of them right now are showing that Donald Trump is ahead in Pennsylvania. There's a couple others that are out today for the Senate. McCormick versus Casey. This is a crucial race in the state of Pennsylvania. Casey is up by just 1 point. So obviously this is from the Hill and Emerson. That is in the margin of error. And then Wisconsin. This Senate race between Hovde and Baldwin, it is a tie there. So Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. We have a Senate race in Arizona that's important. Lake versus Gallego. Kari Lake. Marisol puts it, Gallego is up by 8 points in that state as well. All right, in a moment we'll get to Roshini Rajkumar. First I want to get to our friend, Dr. Matt Caid with Advanced Orthopedic Specialists. Right now, he says, listen, a lot of people are coming in right now because their hips and their knees, they're hurting right now and they're tired of it. So a lot of them are coming in for surgery, but there are a whole slew of other options that he's dealing with as well. If you've got a lot of pain in your hips or knees or elsewhere. Early this morning, I sat down with Dr. Matt Caid right here on Tom Jordan Live. Yeah, Advanced Orthopedic Specialist, Dr. Matt Caid. It's nice to have you back.
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Great, and I know it's a busy time of year for you, and I just had a friend of mine who just told me, he said, yeah, I'm getting my knee replaced, and there's a lot of things happening, I know, in your world right now, and I want you to talk, if you could, about anterior hip replacement surgery, because I know that's something you specialize in, and it seems like there's a lot of that happening right now.
Yeah, hip replacements, like we talked about last time, are really common. And the anterior hip replacement, people say it's from the front, basically. So it's the front of your hip. It gained popularity about 15, 20 years ago. And the old way to do it was you have to cut muscle, get into the hip, and then you have to repair the muscle with suture and some other things. Hopefully that heals. But what they saw was that sometimes it wouldn't heal, or they would dislocate. So the ball would pop out of socket. But from the front, there's almost no risk of a dislocation because we don't cut any muscle. We go in between the muscle, we do our thing, and we close everything up, and then it's just a lot more stable. And because we don't cut those muscles, people recover a lot faster, and they have less pain. So it's just kind of a better way to do it.
Yeah, so you learn a lot over the years how to do it in the best way, in the most efficient way, and with the best recovery, I think, possible. That's wonderful. Are there particular candidates who are better candidates for anterior hip replacement than maybe others?
Yeah, I think that in my practice, everybody gets a minimally invasive anterior hip. So if you have a large stomach and it kind of hangs over the front of your hip, sometimes surgeons will get nervous to do that. It's a little more difficult, but I find that, if we can work around that and just be very careful with the soft tissue, they do as good or better than even other patients.
Something that's very exciting, and I know it is in your world, is regenerative medicine, like stem cell therapy. And do you use that in your practice? And if you do, can you kind of describe what that is and how it interacts with, orthopedic
As much as I love surgery and people do so well, I always tell people keeping your hip or your knee as long as you can is usually the best. And regenerative things like PRP and stem cells are great. Basically, the cells can proliferate into different kinds of cells. So whether it's your stem cells that we get from your hip, so we get the bone marrow, we spin it to the stem cells or the PRP plasma, and then those cells go to the hip or the knee, and they try to repair or heal the articular cartilage. So
this is incredibly, I think, groundbreaking, because you're getting these cells, and if people don't understand stem cells, like, it could go back on that point a little bit, is that you can use these cells early on in that process, if you want to call it that, for any aspect of the body. How is that possible? And what ends up happening to cells once they get into a particular location, whether it's in the knee or it's the hip or somewhere else?
So if they're in a certain environment that needs healing, that environment can stimulate those cells to proliferate to what you need, whether it's a chondrocyte or tendon cells, things to heal. And these stem cells are from your body. So these are not, embryonic or umbilical stem cells, which those are even earlier in someone's life. So those can proliferate to almost anything. But the stuff we're using is your own stem cells, and they still can proliferate and heal. And it's just, it's great. Yeah.
So this is more of a treatment prior to a surgery, or maybe even to avoid surgery in that case.
Yeah, and I think that probably not everyone, but maybe 75% of people get really good results, meaning they get pain relief and good function for several months to years. And that depends on the person. So if you're under 65, your stem cells work better. If you have minimal arthritis, it'll work better. But yeah, it's great. You know, the studies keep getting better and better with it.
And you're taking it from your own body, right? So these are very familiar with you anyway.
Oh yeah. There's no reactions or anything like that. You know, for the PRP, we do a peripheral blood draw. So you just come in and get a draw here. For the stem cells, I go through the iliac crest and get it out of your bone marrow, out of your hip.
Yeah, that's phenomenal.
Yep.
What other treatments are there? I know you use like steroid injections and hyaluronic acid and those types of things. What are some of those alternative to surgery or just treatments for different types of pain or therapy?
Yeah, you know, I think that steroids and hyaluronic acid, they work in different ways. So a steroid is just decreasing inflammation in your joint. So your knee has arthritis. Inside, the lining is red and irritated and inflamed. Steroid goes in, calms it down. People will say, well, that's just a Band-Aid. Well, you know, if it's a Band-Aid that lasts you a year, that's a pretty good Band-Aid. Again, that's not for everybody. You know, if someone comes in, they get a steroid shot, and it lasts them for 2 weeks, then I say, it might be too far gone. Maybe we got to talk about surgery.
Right, but if you're getting a year's worth of relief, and maybe what are the, I don't know if you want to call them risks or whatnot, but how do you determine as an orthopedic surgeon if someone is a better candidate for maybe hyaluronic acid or the steroid injections versus, hey, it's time for you to get some surgery to fix this issue once for all?
A lot of it is the x-rays. If you still have good cartilage left, I think we can try all these options. If you don't, then I usually tell people, you know, this is kind of our last ditch effort. You know, you're almost bone on bone. If you want to try something, we can try it, but I'm not really going to say, you know, this is going to do that much, but we can try. Some people really don't want surgery, and I'm happy to try all the conservative things for them, you know.
So my friend I mentioned earlier, he's bone on bone, and he's been bone on bone for a while. And he's wanted to wait and to prolong the going in for surgery. You know, he's getting up there in age, and now he's finding out, okay, bone on bone means this is pretty much my only option. What are the risks if you wait too long? He's still good, but for people who are maybe waiting because they don't want to do this, what are the risks if you don't go in for surgery? If you're that far along and that advanced in your condition, bone on bone, what are some of those risks?
Yeah, you know, sometimes it gets bad enough that the bone starts to degrade and it starts to get unstable. Certain patterns of arthritis can do that. And that's more rare, but that can happen. But I always tell people that, you know, it's easier to recover. Let's say you're 65. I tell people it's a lot easier when you're 65 than when you're 75. So, you know, people, you know, they can grit and bear it for another 5-10 years, but then you live 5-10 years with a really painful hip or knee. And then when you do it, maybe in that meantime, maybe you've developed diabetes, or maybe you've started some kidney failure, some things that, you know, medically, you know, makes your recovery harder. So.
And multiple things going on at once is just not easy to deal with. You're right. The more advanced you get in your age, you might have some other health issues that pop up. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of physical therapy in both the non-surgical care and in post-surgical recovery?
Yeah, you know, especially for knee replacements, physical therapy is really important. So strength and flexibility is like top priority for the hips and the knees. If you're not moving it, if you're not getting stronger, you know, they will stiffen up, they will scar down. So it's very, very important.
Yeah. So you work with people in physical therapists and all the partnerships and whatnot.
Yeah. You know, I know the majority of the physical therapists in the area, and then we have a physical therapy clinic in my office. So that's really nice that I can walk 20 yards and see a post-op patient and say, "Hey, how you doing?" And we can troubleshoot something. And they it's nice to have your surgeon right there.
Remind folks where you're located.
We're right on Grand River in Brighton. Advanced orthopedic specialists. We're close to the Woodland Building. We're next door. So.
Yeah.
But I go to Novi, operate in Commerce, Farmington Hills. We have a surgery center too. So I can kind of tailor the location to you, but our main office is in Brighton.
And your website.
So it's advancedortho.net, and then I'm on Instagram and Facebook, all this stuff.
Yeah,
so.
Dr. Matt Caid, Advanced Orthopedic Specialist. It's really phenomenal work you're doing there, and I know when you say advanced, you really are. You're like on the leading edge of technology and constantly learning, so it's fantastic. I know it's a busy time of year, so I appreciate you coming in.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Yeah, thanks to Dr. Matt Caid, Advanced Orthopedic Specialist. By the way, if you want to help, if you want to be a sponsor as well, you can just give me a little note at tom@wayneradio.com. All right, I want to go to Minnesota because Minnesota is one of those states that is pretty solidly blue right now. And of course, it's also the state from which the Democratic vice presidential candidate hails from. And right now, Kamala Harris is leading Donald Trump in Minnesota 49% to 44.3%. That is the Real Clear Politics average for that of all the polls that have come in. So we want to go to a Minnesotan. That would be Roshini Rajkumar. She is the host of the Crisis Files podcast. She is an attorney, she is a political analyst, and she's a messaging specialist as well, and also a former journalist, television journalist as well. Roshini Rajkumar, so nice to have you back with me the first time on this program. Good to see you.
Well, it's really great. It's really great to be on with you, Tom, and congrats on your new show. Yeah, it's kind of a hot time to be in Minneapolis, in Minnesota right now. And these polls, I mean, I feel like every day I wake up, there are 5 new polls.
I know, and they're shifting back and forth. Is Minnesota still, do you think it's going to be solidly blue? I mean, some of these polls are in the margin of error between Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, and Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. What are you seeing, like the trending situation polling-wise in the state of Minnesota?
Well, yeah, I mean, when you just said those latest numbers, I'm frankly a little surprised in light of the fact that our state has the vice presidential candidate. That's surprising that it is within the margin of error. You usually think about the margin of error as 3 to 5%. So when you are sitting there at 49 to 44.5, I think you said, that seems like it's a little too slim for Kamala Harris in the state of Minnesota. I would be stunned on election day and once all the votes are in, if Minnesota were to go anything but blue. I mean, I would be very stunned by that, but I'm also equally surprised right now that it's not more like 60 to 70% for Kamala Harris in light of the traditional blue state that Minnesota tends to be.
I have family, as we talked about, in the Minneapolis area, and I've visited a number of times. And it is much like Michigan. There's a strong Arab American, Muslim American population in Minnesota, much like here in the state of Michigan. Here in the state of Michigan, there is an Abandon Harris campaign going on from that voting bloc because they don't like what's happened in the Middle East under the Biden-Harris administration. And they're trying to expand that campaign into other states like Georgia and Wisconsin. Are you seeing that trend develop in the state of Minnesota as well?
I'm not seeing it to the extent that you're seeing it in Michigan. What I am seeing, though, is that college campus piece, and especially kind of stemming from or starting from college campuses where they are very upset about what's going on in the Middle East. And that's where some of that turmoil and I guess not controversy, but really that abrasion with the Harris campaign. So again, I wouldn't want to overstate it. I don't think it's as strong of a feeling as in Michigan, but it is something to watch here in Minnesota too.
Yeah, for sure. I want to ask you this because Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, they've come out multiple times and they've categorized Donald Trump as a threat to democracy. I mean, that's been the theme for quite some time for pretty much the whole of the Democratic Party against Donald Trump. And, yesterday, Joe Biden had come out and he said that, listen, Donald Trump, what he would like to do, and he thinks he has the power to do this, is to load a gun and take it and start shooting people and killing people, eliminating them physically. And Joe Biden's putting out this rhetoric, and then he says, and I want to lock him up. And then he backtracks a little bit. Well, I mean, politically, of course, politically, I want to lock him up, which we don't know what that means either. But there is some polling data, and my understanding is that the Kamala Harris team is realizing that this message regarding the threat to democracy is not resonating as well as these other. In fact, it's dead last, according to the Kamala Harris campaign, in terms of the message resonating with voters, that they really are buying into this. You're a messaging specialist. You're a crisis management specialist as well. What would you recommend for Kamala Harris to do? Should she continue down this line, or should she pivot to something else?
Well, and here's the thing. There's not a lot of time to pivot, right? Election day is less than 2 weeks away. I'm big on staying authentic and consistent with your messaging. And what I've been seeing over the last few weeks from the Harris campaign is almost like this menu or potpourri. What are we going to do this week in our main message? And I say this as someone who is definitely nonpartisan, just judging on messaging and optics. If you have to kind of pick what's my theme of the week or my message of the week, that doesn't really tell voters that you as a campaign have a theme or some sort of agenda that you're running. So that's really the trouble there, is based on either polling or based on what one leader says, in this case, the president of the United States says, that you change and jump around with your messaging. That's just never a good plan. In fact, Tom, it's not a plan, right? It's more, okay, kind of a stream of consciousness. What are we doing this week to try to get a certain segment of voters?
Yeah, it's like headline grabbing or whack-a-mole, seeing what's going to stick and then moving on to something else if it doesn't. And sometimes they don't move on. They just stay right there, keep whacking that same mole that rears its head. What about Donald Trump? Because he says, his campaign does, that now until Election Day, they're going to really hone in on two issues. That would be the economy and then illegal immigration. Do you think that's strategic? That's good?
Yeah, I mean, they should have really been doing that from the beginning. Those are the strongest messages for Donald Trump. He has a history on those items when he was president of the United States. He has a record that people can measure, that journalists can look at and say, this is true, this is not true. And for whatever reason, he didn't stick with that, both at the presidential debate as well as in other big interviews that he's had since then. So that's kind of the negative there, that he didn't just stick with those two strong messages that most of the country, you say the economy, you say border security, and nearly everyone in the country can relate to one or both of those. So I think it's absolutely the right strategy for the last under 2 weeks of the campaign to stick with those two where you have an actual record.
Well, you look at both those issues, and Kamala Harris will come out and say, yeah, she's been very strong on those two issues. It's Donald Trump that is causing the economy to flounder in the areas that it is, and inflation to go up. And it's Donald Trump who's to blame for the illegal immigration crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border. Is that a smart way to characterize what's happening, do you think?
I don't think so. I mean, not to be too critical of her, but I think we can see that you weren't doing those things. I mean, sometimes when she comes out and says things like that, it's almost like an insult to the intelligence of the American people, because you weren't doing those things, you aren't doing those things, and you're currently the sitting vice president and could influence some of those things present day.
Yeah. And also, and we'll get to this in a moment after we discuss this issue, but there's now evidence that members of the Department of Homeland Security have been actively inviting people to commit illegal immigration and come across, and touting the benefits of doing that and what they can do in this country if they come across illegally. And here's how you do it, that kind of thing. So we'll get into that after our discussion here. I want to get your thoughts, though, on Tulsi Gabbard, because now she left the Democratic Party a while back. She ran for president as a Democrat, and then she kind of left that party because she thought it was too, they had swayed too far to the left. It's not the old Democratic Party that she was aware of, but she remained an independent until this week. She announced that she was now joining the Republican Party. How damaging do you think that is to Democrats, and how beneficial is that to Republicans?
I'm not sure it's necessarily a big step either way. I think a lot of people, because Tulsi Gabbard has been on the campaign trail and spoken in different interviews for Donald Trump, I'm guessing a lot of people who don't follow this as closely as you and I do, Tom, have already thought she switched to the Republican Party. And sometimes being an independent, unless you're truly an independent and not speaking for either candidate, you're going to be labeled with one side or the other. And she's really been pro Donald Trump for a long time and kind of anti some of the Democrats for a while. There's a bit of a chip on her shoulder with the Democrats and probably they for her. So I don't know that it's going to be, a carbon positive or carbon negative. I think it's a pretty neutral thing. We'll see how that plays out.
One final question for you, because there are potentially millions of people, no matter what happens on November 5th, that are going to find themselves in a personal crisis. And there are a lot of people who are going to be highly disappointed, regardless of who wins. If Donald Trump wins, many millions of people will be incredibly disappointed and find themselves in a personal crisis. If Kamala Harris wins, same thing. A lot of people will be distraught and find themselves in a personal crisis, and that could spill out into segments of our society. What would you recommend on a personal level from a crisis management perspective? How do individuals deal with this kind of disappointment, regardless of what happens?
Well, I think now in these days leading up, people need to do their own assessment of themselves, their families, their different cohorts, whether it's work, their neighborhood, volunteer organizations they're part of, and really assess, am I going to be able to handle it if my candidate wins versus the other candidate wins? And what will my reaction be? So we can only really control ourselves, but we can also put ourselves in position to understand we probably need to go through some healing in our own individual audiences, as well as a nation after November 5th. So you got to let it start with you. The buck kind of stops here with you individually, and let that be the guide. I think we have to, I'm not trying to even be funny. I think plan to, go meditate, go to yoga class, get in a workout election day and the next day, just to burn off steam in some healthier ways.
Yeah, and don't gloat as well. I try not to do that, although sometimes it's hard not to do if you've been fighting for something for so many years or so much time. But don't gloat. Just move on and be happy if you won. And if you lost, it's okay to grieve, but deal with it in the healthiest manner possible. Always really happy to have you on the program. Roshini Rajkumar, she is the host of the Crisis Files podcast. Check it out. It's phenomenal programming. Obviously a savvy political analyst and an attorney as well, and a former television journalist. You have so many things on your resume. Always good to talk to you. Roshini Rajkumar, thank you so much.
Thank you, Tom.
Appreciate it. Take care. All right, I want to get into some headlines here. I've been saying this for a number of years, and I really have, that the Biden-Harris administration has been inviting people from all over the world to cross into the country illegally. After I get to this, I want to get to your comments as well. But they have been inviting people to come into this country illegally, to illegally immigrate to this country, and they've helped them figure out how to do it. They use these NGOs. They show them strategic locations where they probably will not get caught. What to say to convince Border Patrol to let them through, etc. And I was covering this back in 2021. So now there's this, though, this stunning new report that reveals a Department of Homeland Security official has been using social media to promote illegal immigration. And this is according to the American Accountability Foundation, an associate counsel in that group for U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. That's the guy in the Department of Homeland Security who is posting videos on platforms like YouTube and TikTok, showcasing the stories of illegal immigrants. And his content is often in Spanish, but it highlights their financial success after crossing the border illegally and painting an appealing picture for potential border crossers. And strangely enough, YouTube wasn't taking down these videos, asking people to break the law. Same for TikTok. But when they were contacted by news outlets, this guy Osorio, the social media accounts were swiftly set to private, and his LinkedIn profile vanished. And some videos showcased migrants sharing advice on illegal entry. Others were detailing how amnesty policies benefited their legal status. Amnesty policies, which again, Kamala Harris came out, if you didn't see this, on Univision, and came out in support of giving these illegal immigrants not only amnesty, but a pathway to U.S. citizenship. So they know that's the case if they come over here legally or not. That eventually, if they get Kamala Harris into office, that they will potentially have citizenship in this country, even though they broke the law to get here. All right, that was an update on that. Let's take some comments and some questions here on Tom Jordan Live. As always, love to take them. Cameron is going to bring them up. Let's start with the engineer now, Tom, Jocelyn Benson. is correct, depending on what the meaning of is. Lawyers and politicians always want you to believe that they said sometime when they said something, but when they technically did not. Yeah, you're right. It's called manipulation. So they use key phrases to make it sound like, for example, CNN put on their little, they call it a CG, a Chiron graphic, a title at the bottom of the screen that said Elon Musk falsely stated that there are more voters than citizens in the state of Michigan. That's not what he said. He didn't say citizens. He said voting age legal citizens is what he said. Citizens of voting age. But they took that out and they just said, yeah, he's false because there are not more registered voters than there are citizens. Well, they left out the voting age citizens or vote. I forget exactly. I'm paraphrasing, but they leave out this critical information that is key to the point they are making. And Jocelyn Benson did the same thing in a response to X and MSNBC and CNN. They just loved it and they put her on. And she is out there now saying that these thoughts that Elon Musk and others who say that there might be some fraud or there might be some shenanigans going into this election, they're putting dangerous thoughts into your mind. And you need to take photos of them and send them to my office. And we'll take it from there, is what Jocelyn Benson and the Attorney General of Michigan, Dana Nessel, is telling people to do. If you have partisan messaging, turn those people in. You're kidding. All right, engineer, always good. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Let's go next to Vaughn Westerby. Vaughn, good to hear from you. Did anyone listen to the WJR interview Paul W. Smith did with Liz Cheney yesterday? Paul W. said he was proud and honored to have her on. Okay, listen, I like him. I'm not going to say anything about him. He's a guy I've gotten to know. He's a friend in that sense. But I think what you said, I'll just let it be right there. You're getting an understanding of Liz Cheney is an full-on anti-Trumper. She supports Kamala Harris over Donald Trump as a Republican simply because she hates the guy. And how anybody who calls himself a Republican who can vote for somebody who is a staunch advocate for everything anti-conservative is beyond me. And yeah, so there you have it. Vaughn, thanks so much for that comment. I do appreciate it. Next comment is from Ferris Happenings. What up, Ferris Happenings? How about if we just send in the entire ad that's running in Michigan from the Harris campaign on the 2025 project? Trump has nothing to do with it, yet they keep saying he does. That is absolutely correct, Ferris. That's the thing. You have to run on things that absolutely are not true. Project 2025, most people have never read this, like 900-plus page document. And most of it, none of it says what the Democrats say it's going to do, by the way. You're right, Donald Trump had nothing to do with this. This is something the Heritage Foundation put out a long time ago, and they've been working on it to offer it to whomever might be the eventual Republican conservative candidate for president of the United States. Donald Trump was not a part of it. Were some staff members who worked in the administration part of it? Yeah. But anytime you leave a job, you're free to go work wherever you want to. It doesn't mean Donald Trump had anything to do with it. But even if he had, and I've spoken to the author of Project 2025, and we went through a number of these policy ideas they have. And the whole idea behind Project 2025 is to fight against cultural Marxism. It is the opposite of taking control of this country. It does not give the president of the United States superhuman powers to overthrow the government and to instill, martial law and to shut people down. It doesn't do anything of that. What it does do is protect the Constitution. It protects individual rights, civil liberties. And so what Kamala Harris is doing, she is engaging in disinformation. Maybe Jocelyn Benson and Dana Nessel should ask people to take photos of her and turn her in to their office, because this, to me, is election interference. We have one more comment, and as this extended version of Tom Jordan Live continues, one more, let's bring that up, and then we'll have to say goodbye from here. Charles Beatty, it's sad what WJR has become when the most conservative-sounding voice is the proclaimed liberal Mitch Albom. Grateful Tom has his own show. Hey, I really appreciate that. Charles, thank you so much. I'm grateful to have my own show, too, because we are free here. We are uncensored to talk freely about the issues that I think you care about, the most Americans, the majority of Americans, and certainly I would say all conservatives now have, I think, a place to go to to feel like they're not in their own head, their own space, and they're the only ones thinking these thoughts. No, the majority of people do. We just need the media to allow people to speak freely and honestly about these issues. So, Charles, thank you so much. I appreciate your support. That's going to do it for this edition of Tom Jordan Live. As always, God bless you. Have a fantastic day. We'll see you back here tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern on Tom Jordan Live.